The galaxy had been peaceful for almost 100 years. 17 different alien species had come together to form the Galactic Concord, a great alliance that kept order among the stars. They traded with each other. They shared knowledge. They built stations and colonies across thousands of worlds. But there was one species that the others never quite understood: humans. Humans came from a planet called Earth. It was a world that the alien scientists had classified as a Category 12. This meant that almost everything about the planet was deadly. The gravity was strong enough to crush the bones of most alien species. The atmosphere carried diseases that could wipe out entire populations. Predators roamed every continent, hunting in packs with teeth and claws. The weather shifted from burning heat to freezing cold. Earthquakes shook the ground. Volcanoes spewed fire. Oceans hid monsters in their depths. And yet humans had not only survived on this nightmare world, they had thrived. They had built cities and nations. They had created art and music and literature. They had reached for the stars and joined the galactic community. The other species looked at humans with a mixture of respect and fear. They called them and kept their distance whenever possible. Commander Jack did not think about any of this as he stood on the bridge of his ship. The USS Ironclad was a Valkyrie-class destroyer, one of the finest vessels in the human fleet. It carried 200 crew members and enough firepower to level a small moon. For the past 6 months, Jack and his crew had been stationed at the edge of conquered space, running patrol missions along the border. Nothing exciting ever happened out here. The days blended together in a routine of sensor sweeps and system checks. Jack was a tall man with gray starting to show at his temples. He had served in the fleet for 23 years and had seen his share of action during the border conflicts. But those days felt like ancient history now. He sometimes wondered if he would spend the rest of his career watching empty space. Lieutenant Corinne Wells sat at the communications station. She was younger than Jack, with sharp eyes and quick hands that danced across her console. She had joined the Ironclad 2 years ago and had proven herself to be one of the best communications officers Jack had ever worked with. On this particular day, she was monitoring the standard frequencies and fighting the urge to yawn. Then something changed. Corinne sat up straight in her chair. Her fingers moved faster as she adjusted her equipment. Static crackled through the bridge speakers, and beneath the static was something else. A signal, a voice. "Commander," Corinne said, "I am picking up a distress call." Jack turned to face her. "What kind of distress call?" "It is using the old Concord emergency frequency, the one that was established 50 years ago for extinction-level events. I have never heard anyone actually use it before." The bridge went quiet. Everyone understood what that frequency meant. It was only supposed to be activated when an entire species faced complete annihilation. It was the final cry for help when all other hope was lost. "Where is it coming from?" Jack asked. Corinne checked her readings twice before answering. "The home system, sir. The signal identifies itself as their final SOS protocol. They are saying that their entire species is under threat." Jack felt his stomach tighten. They were one of the gentlest species in the Concord. They were tall and slender, with delicate bodies and large eyes that seemed to hold endless curiosity. They had devoted themselves to science and philosophy. They had never harmed anyone. They did not even have a military because they had never needed one. The thought of someone attacking them was almost impossible to imagine. Chief Tactical Officer Cole pulled up the sector map on the main display. Was a broad-shouldered man with a calm voice that never seemed to waver even in the worst situations. He studied the data flowing across his screen. "Commander, the system is 3 days away at maximum speed, but I am detecting something else. There is a fleet already moving toward that position." "Whose fleet?" Jack asked. Looked up from his console. His face had gone pale. "Ours, sir, and not just ours. I am reading ships from the Empire and the Confederation as well. Every warship from all 3 is converging on the system." Jack understood immediately. They came from a world of crushing gravity and toxic storms. They had evolved on a planet covered in active volcanoes and acid seas. Along with humans, they formed an unofficial alliance known as the Coalition. They were the species that had survived impossible worlds and emerged stronger for it. If all of them were responding to this signal, then something terrible was happening. "Open a channel to Fleet Command," Jack ordered. Karen worked her console. A moment later, the face of Admiral Lisa appeared on the main screen. She was an older woman with silver hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She commanded the dreadnought USS Avalon and served as the senior officer of the human fleet. "Commander," she said, "I was about to contact you. I assume you have received the distress signal." "Yes, Admiral. What is happening out there?" Admiral's expression was grim. "An unknown species has emerged from the outer void. They call themselves the... 3 days ago, they launched a full invasion of space. They have already destroyed 4 colony worlds. Millions are dead. They have no way to defend themselves." Jack felt cold anger building in his chest. What about the conquered? Are the other species sending help? "No," the Admiral's voice was hard. "The Conquered Council held an emergency vote. They have decided to quarantine the sector and abandon them to their fate. They are too afraid to fight." "And we are not afraid." Admiral almost smiled. "We are terrified, Commander, but we do not let fear stop us from doing what is right. Set course for the system at maximum speed. The Coalition fleet will be waiting for you." The screen went dark. Jack stood in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. His crew was watching him, waiting for orders. "You heard the Admiral," he said quietly. "Set course for maximum burn, and someone wake up the Marines. Tell them to get ready for a fight." The USS Ironclad turned toward the stars and began its journey toward war. The USS Ironclad traveled through hyperspace for 3 days. During that time, Commander Jack made sure his crew was ready for whatever waited for them. The Marines trained in the cargo bays, running combat drills until their muscles ached. The engineers checked every system twice and then checked them again. The medical staff prepared the sick bay for casualties that everyone hoped would never come. Jack spent most of his time in his quarters, studying everything the fleet had learned about them. The information was limited and terrifying. They were not like any species the galaxy had encountered before. They were creatures, a twisted blend of flesh and machine that seemed to exist only to consume and destroy. They did not negotiate. They did not take prisoners. They simply arrived at a world, stripped it of all resources and life, and moved on to the next target. No one knew where they came from. The outer void was the name given to the unexplored regions beyond conquered space, a vast darkness where no ship had ever traveled and returned. They had emerged from that darkness like a plague, and now they were spreading. On the 3rd day, Karen Wells announced that they were approaching the rally point. Jack made his way to the bridge and watched as the ironclad dropped out of hyperspace. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. 47 warships hung in formation against the black backdrop of space. Human destroyers and cruisers formed neat lines, their gray hulls bristling with weapons. Siege vessels loomed nearby, massive ships built like fortresses that could withstand almost any attack. They had positioned itself at the front, their vessels painted in the red and orange colors of volcanic fire. It was the largest gathering of ships in history, and every single one of them had come to fight. "Commander," Cole said from his station, "the flagship is requesting your presence for a command briefing." Jack nodded. "Karen, you have the bridge. I will return shortly." He took a shuttle to the USS Avalon, Admiral's dreadnought. The ship was enormous, nearly a kilometer long and carrying enough firepower to challenge a small fleet on its own. Jack had served on the Avalon early in his career and still remembered the sense of awe he had felt walking its corridors. The briefing room was filled with officers from all 3 species. Jack recognized some of the human commanders. The representatives were massive beings. their thick bodies covered in armored scales that had evolved to protect them from their crushing gravity. The delegates were even more impressive, eight-limbed warriors with dark exoskeletons and eyes that glowed with inner heat. Admiral Lisa stood at the head of the table. She activated a holographic display that showed the system in detail. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I will keep this brief because we do not have much time. They have surrounded Prime with a blockade of approximately 200 vessels. They are systematically destroying any ship that tries to escape. 4 billion are trapped on the surface, waiting to be harvested." She changed the display to show images of ships. They were organic and twisted, looking more like diseased organs than spacecraft. Tentacles and spines covered their hulls. They moved through space with an unnatural grace that made Jack feel slightly sick. "They use fear as their primary weapon," Admiral continued. "They broadcast psychic signals designed to cause panic and despair. Every species they have encountered has either fled or surrendered without a fight. They have never lost a battle because they have never faced an enemy willing to stand against them." A commander spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. "They have never faced." "Exactly." Admiral allowed herself a small smile. "Our species evolved on worlds that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to face our fears because we had no other choice. They do not know what they are about to encounter." She outlined the battle plan. The fleet would drop out of hyperspace in a tight formation and immediately engage the blockade. The goal was to break through to the planet and establish a defensive perimeter while evacuating as many as possible. It would be bloody. It would be dangerous, but it was the only chance they had. Jack returned to the ironclad and gathered his senior officers in the conference room. Lieutenant joined them. She was the ship's, a quiet woman with glasses and a sharp mind. She had been studying the data since they first received the distress call. "I have been analyzing their behavior patterns," said. "They operate as a collective. They share thoughts and commands through some kind of psychic network. If we could find and destroy the source of that network, their entire fleet would fall into chaos." "Do we know where the source is?" Jack asked. "I believe it is their mothership. Our long-range sensors detected a massive vessel hiding behind one of its moons. It is the size of a small planetoid. I think that is where their collective intelligence resides." Cole leaned forward. "So we need to kill the brain to stop the body." "In simple terms, yes." Jack considered this information. Destroying the mothership would not be easy. Getting close enough would require fighting through the entire fleet. But if they could do it, they might be able to end the war in a single stroke. "Pass this analysis to the Admiral," Jack ordered. "It might change our strategy." The fleet began its final approach to the system. Jack stood on the bridge and watched the stars blur past as they prepared to jump. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes and hear it in the tension of their voices. But they were also determined. They had sworn an oath to protect the innocent, and they would not break that oath today. "All hands," Jack said over the ship-wide communication system. "This is the commander. In a few minutes we will enter combat against an enemy that has never known defeat. They believe they are predators. They believe they are the most dangerous things in the galaxy. They are wrong. We come from a world where everything wanted to kill us and we survived anyway. Today we show what real predators look like. Today we fight for everyone who cannot fight for themselves. Prepare for battle." The fleet jumped into the fire. The fleet emerged from hyperspace in a blaze of light. 47 warships materialized above Prime in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. Below them, the beautiful blue and green planet hung like a jewel against the darkness. But surrounding that jewel was a ring of nightmares. The fleet was even larger than the intelligence had suggested. More than 300 alien vessels circled the planet in a choking formation. Their organic hulls pulsed with sickly light. Tentacles extended between ships like the threads of some vast web. They had been waiting here for days, slowly tightening their grip while they huddled in fear on the surface below. Commander Jack stared at the enemy fleet on his display screen. The numbers were not in their favor. They were outnumbered more than 6-1. Any sane military commander would have called for a retreat. But we're not known for being sane. All weapons target the nearest enemy vessels, Jack ordered. Fire at will. The USS Ironclad unleashed its first salvo. Rounds accelerated to incredible speeds, tore through the vacuum of space, and slammed into a cruiser. The alien ship shuddered as the projectiles punched through its organic hull. Purple blood and mechanical fluid sprayed into the void. Across the battlefield, the rest of the fleet opened fire at the same moment. Human ships launched missiles and rounds. Siege vessels fired graviton beams that bent space itself, crushing enemy fighters into dense balls of compressed matter. They charged forward with their engines burning hot, their warriors eager to close the distance for boarding actions. They had never experienced anything like this. Every species they had encountered before had tried to run. Some had surrendered immediately, hopping for mercy that never came. Others had fought briefly before their morale shattered under the weight of psychic terror. But these new enemies did not flee. They did not surrender. They attacked with a ferocity that they could not understand. "They are retreating," Cole reported from his tactical station. His voice carried a note of surprise. "The ships in our sector are pulling back." Jack watched the enemy vessels withdraw from the orbital zone. Something felt wrong. There were predators. Predators did not simply give up. "It is a trap," he said quietly. "They want us to follow. They want us to spread out and break formation." His instincts were proven correct moments later. A shadow fell across the fleet as something massive emerged from behind its largest moon. The mothership was beyond anything Jack had imagined. It was the size of a small world, a twisted mass of flesh and metal that seemed to breathe as it moved. Eyes the size of cities dotted its surface. Tentacles kilometers long reached out into space. And then it screamed. The psychic attack hit the fleet like a physical wave. Jack felt it crash against his mind, a wall of pure terror that tried to drown his thoughts. Images flooded his brain. He saw his ship destroyed. He saw his crew dying in agony. He saw Earth burning, humanity extinct, everything he had ever loved reduced to ash and memory. Across the bridge, crew members cried out in pain. Some clutched their heads. Others fell to their knees. The weaker-minded aliens would have gone mad from such an assault. Their ships would have lost all coordination as crews turned on each other or simply gave up. But these were humans. These were. Jack gritted his teeth and forced the visions away. He had felt fear before. He had grown up on a planet where fear was a constant companion. You learned to push through it or you died. There was no third option. "Is that all they have?" Corinne Wells muttered from her station. She was rubbing her temple with one hand while working her console with the other. "I have had worse headaches from bad coffee." Cole was already back at his tactical display, his jaw tight but his hands steady. "The psychic attack is fatting, Commander. I think they expected it to work." Jack opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Commander of the Ironclad. The enemy just threw their best punch and we are still standing. They wanted to break us with fear, but we were born in fear. We grew up surrounded by things that wanted to eat us. We do not break. Now let us show these creatures what happens when they threaten our friends. All ships target the mothership. Full assault." The fleet reformed and charged toward the massive entity. The mothership responded by launching waves of smaller vessels from ports along its surface. Thousands of fighters swarmed toward the ships like angry insects defending their hive. The battle became chaos. Jack watched his tactical display as it filled with markers representing enemy and friendly vessels. Explosions bloomed across the darkness of space. Ships died on both sides. The ironclad shuddered as enemy weapons struck its armor, but it held together and kept firing. "Commander," called from her station, "I am detecting a weak point on the mothership." There is a cavity near its center that appears to lead to an internal chamber. I believe that is where the collective intelligence is housed. Jack studied the data she sent to his screen. The cavity was protected by layers of defensive weapons and armored tissue. Getting a ship close enough to exploit it would be nearly impossible. But getting Marines inside might work. Can our assault shuttles reach that cavity? Ran the calculations. It would be extremely dangerous, sir. We would lose most of them before they got through, but some might make it. Jack thought about the trapped on the planet below. 4 billion innocent lives waiting to be slaughtered. He thought about Lieutenant Daniel and the Marines who had trained for exactly this kind of mission. They knew the risks. They had accepted them when they put on the uniform. "Prepare the assault teams," Jack ordered. "We are going to cut off the head of the snake." Below on Prime, the people watched the battle rage across their sky. For the first time in days, they felt something other than despair. They felt hope. Lieutenant Daniel stood in the shuttle bay of the USS Ironclad and looked at the 11 Marines who would follow him into hell. They were the best soldiers he had ever served with. Each one had volunteered for this mission, knowing that their chances of survival were almost zero. None of them had hesitated. Daniel was a compact man with dark hair and calm eyes that hid a warrior's heart. He had grown up in a small town where he learned to hunt before he learned to read. The instincts that had helped his ancestors survive on Earth now prepared him to face something far more dangerous. "Listen up," he said to his team. "Our job is simple. We fly to the mothership, find the central chamber, and destroy whatever is controlling the fleet. Intelligence says it is some kind of collective intelligence, a brain that commands all the other ships. We kill it, and the enemy falls apart." Sergeant Maria Santos checked her rifle one last time. She was the squad's best marksman, capable of hitting a target at impossible ranges even under fire. And if intelligence is wrong, then we improvise. We find something important and blow it up. Either way, we make our deaths count for something. The shuttle bay doors opened, revealing the chaos of battle outside. Explosions lit the darkness. Ships twisted and burned. The mothership loomed in the distance like a diseased moon, its surface crawling with defensive weapons. 12 assault shuttles launched from the Ironclad. Similar craft departed from other ships in the fleet. Nearly 200 Marines were making this desperate run, knowing that most would never return. The first wave of fighters hit them before they had traveled 100 kilometers. Daniel watched as 2 shuttles on his right exploded in balls of fire. Another was torn apart by organic tentacles that reached out from a passing enemy vessel. "Evasive maneuvers," the pilot shouted. "Hang on back there." The shuttle rolled and twisted through space, dodging streams of acid and projectiles made of bone. Daniel gripped his safety harness as the craft shuddered from near misses. Through the viewport, he could see the mothership growing larger. Its surface was covered in eyes that tracked their approach and mouths that spat defensive fire. Half of the shuttles were gone by the time they reached the cavity that had identified. The opening was enormous, large enough to swallow a cruiser. It pulsed with sickly light and exhaled clouds of gas into space. "This is it," the pilot announced. "I am taking us in. Good luck down there." The shuttle plunged into the cavity. Walls of organic tissue closed around them, covered in veins and nodes that glowed with strange energy. It was like flying into the throat of some vast creature. Daniel had seen plenty of disturbing things in his career, but this made his skin crawl. They landed on a platform of hardened flesh near what appeared to be a tunnel leading deeper into the mothership. Daniel led his team out of the shuttle and into an environment that no human was meant to experience. The atmosphere was toxic. Their suits filtered it, but Daniel could smell something foul even through his helmet. The walls around them moved slightly, breathing. Pools of liquid that might have been blood dotted the floor. Strange sounds echoed from the darkness ahead. "Move out," Daniel ordered. "Stay tight. Watch each other's backs." They advanced through the tunnel, weapons ready. The first defenders appeared within minutes. They were smaller than the creatures Daniel had seen in the briefings, more like drones than warriors. They had too many limbs and too many teeth, and they screamed with voices that sounded almost human. The Marines opened fire. Bullets designed to pierce armor tore through alien flesh. They fell, but more came behind them, then more after that. "They just keep coming," Maria shouted over the gunfire. "There is no end to them." Daniel pushed forward. Every meter they gained cost ammunition and energy. Private Tommy Grant took a claw to his leg and had to be carried by his teammates. Corporal Victor used his body to shield a wounded soldier and never got up again. By the time they reached the central chamber, only 7 Marines remained. The chamber was vast, a cathedral of flesh and machinery that stretched upward into darkness. At its center floated something that hurt to look at. It was a mass of brain tissue the size of a building, connected to the walls by thousands of cables and organic threads. It pulsed with light, and Daniel could feel its awareness pressing against his mind. This was the intelligence that controlled This was the mind behind the invasion. "Set the charges," Daniel commanded. The Marines spread out, placing explosive devices at key points around the chamber. The brain thing seemed to notice them now. Defenders poured in from multiple entrances. The Marines fought back to back, cutting down enemies while protecting those still planting bombs. Maria went down with acid burns across her chest. Tommy took a spike through his shoulder but kept firing with his other arm. One by one, the team fell until only Daniel and 2 others remained. "Charges set," Private Lisa Harper reported. Her voice was steady despite the chaos around them. "Timer is for 60 seconds. We need to go now." Daniel looked at the entrance they had come through. It was swarming with, there was no way out. He had known this from the beginning. They all had. "Commander," Daniel said into his communicator, "the charges are set. The target will be destroyed in less than 1 minute. Mission accomplished." Jack's voice came back, heavy with emotion. "Daniel, is there any way you can make it out?" Daniel looked at his 2 remaining soldiers. They looked back at him with acceptance in their eyes. They had made their peace. "No, sir, but that is okay. Just make sure those survive. That is all we ask." He ended the communication and raised his rifle. They were closing in from all sides. He would fight until the timer reached 0. He would make every second count. "It has been an honor," Lisa said quietly. "The honor was mine," Daniel replied. The explosion that followed was visible from orbit. The mothership shuddered as its central intelligence was torn apart. Fires bloomed across its surface. The lights in its countless eyes flickered and died. And aboard every vessel in the system, chaos descended. The death of the collective intelligence shattered the fleet. Ships that had been moving with perfect coordination suddenly began drifting without purpose. Some fired on each other, their targeting systems no longer able to tell friend from enemy. Others simply stopped, their crews reduced to mindless husks without the guiding will that had controlled them for so long. Admiral Lisa watched the chaos unfold from the bridge of the USS Avalon. She had seen many battles in her long career, but never anything like this. One moment, they had been fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. The next, their enemy was destroying itself. "All ships weapons free," she announced across the fleet channel. "End this." The obliged. Human destroyers tore through the confused formations with ruthless efficiency. Siege vessels crushed enemy cruisers beneath graviton beams. They finally got the close combat they had been craving, boarding disabled vessels and slaughtering the mindless creatures within. Commander Jack stood on the bridge of the ironclad and watched the battle come to an end. They had lost 12 ships and nearly 3,000 crew members. The cost was terrible, but they were safe. 4 billion innocent lives had been saved because they had chosen to fight. The mothership was the last to fall. Without its central intelligence, It had become nothing more than a giant corpse drifting through space. The combined fleet surrounded it and opened fire. It took nearly an hour to destroy something that large, but eventually the great beast broke apart and scattered into debris. Jack thought about Daniel and the Marines who had given their lives inside that thing. They had known they would not survive. They had gone anyway. That was what it meant to be a. You faced the darkness not because you were unafraid, but because some things were more important than fear. "Commander," Karen Wells said softly, "we are receiving a transmission from the surface. The government wants to speak with you." Jack nodded and accepted the call. A holographic image appeared before him, showing an elder with large silver eyes and trembling hands. The alien's voice shook as it spoke. "Commander, we do not know how to thank you. We had accepted our fate. We had said goodbye to our children and prepared for the end. And then your fleet came. You fought for us when no one else would." Jack felt his throat tighten. "That is what we do. That is what we have always done. The strong protect those who cannot protect themselves. We will never forget this. For as long as our species exists, we will remember that humans and their allies saved us from extinction." The transmission ended, and Jack allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. His crew had earned it. Every person on this ship had earned it. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Concord Council convened an emergency session on the neutral station at the center of conquered space. Representatives from all 17 member species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, a vast chamber designed to make everyone feel small beneath its towering ceiling. For decades, the delegations had been seated at the edges of this room, tolerated but never truly welcomed. Today was different. Ambassador Grant represented humanity. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and a reputation for speaking uncomfortable truths. She had spent her career fighting for humans to be treated as equals in a galaxy that feared them. Now she walked to the center podium and faced the assembly. "You abandoned them," she said simply. Her voice carried across the silent chamber. "When they sent their final distress call, you voted to let them die. You sealed the borders and looked away while an entire civilization prepared for extinction. You were too afraid to fight." The other representatives shifted uncomfortably. Some could not meet her eyes. Continued. "We were afraid too. Do not think for a moment that we charged into that battle without fear. We knew we might lose. We knew many of our people would die, and we went anyway." The representative rose from their seat. Was a respected elder who had survived the siege of there. Their voice trembled with emotion as they addressed the assembly. "The humans and their coalition saved 4 billion of my people. They bled for us. They died for us. Nearly 200 of their Marines sacrificed themselves to destroy the enemy mothership. They knew they would not return, and still they went. We cannot repay this debt. All we can do is tell the truth of what happened." Nodded to and continued her speech. "We come from worlds that tried to kill us every day. We evolved surrounded by predators and disasters and diseases that should have wiped us out 1,000 times over. We survived because we learned that the only way to face danger is together. The thought they understood what it meant to be predators. They were wrong. We are not just predators. We are protectors." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then the ambassador rose and spoke in a deep, rumbling voice that shook the walls. "The coalition stands united. We offer our protection to any species that asks for it. No more will the innocent be abandoned because others are too afraid to fight." The vote that followed was unanimous. The Galactic Concord restructured itself that day. They would no longer be relegated to the fringes of galactic society. They would become its shield, its protectors, its first line of defense against any threat. 1 month after the battle, Commander Jack attended a ceremony on Prime. The planet was still recovering from the siege, but its people had already begun to rebuild. Children played in the streets again. Families gathered in public squares. Hope had returned to a world that had almost lost everything. Jack stood beside Karen, and the surviving officers of the Ironclad. Their ship had lost 37 crew members in the fighting. Each name was carved into a memorial that they had built in the center of their capital city. The Marines who had died destroying the mothership had an entire wing of the memorial dedicated to them. "Do you think the galaxy will ever stop being afraid of us?" Corinne asked quietly. Jack watched the children playing nearby. They were laughing and chasing each other, unaware of how close they had come to never existing at all. They were alive because strangers from a nightmare world had chosen to fight for them. "Maybe someday," Jack replied. "But more importantly, I think they are starting to understand something. Being afraid of us is not always a bad thing, especially when we are afraid for them." The stars shone overhead, bright and endless and full of possibilities. Somewhere out there, other species might be sending distress calls, hoping that someone would answer. And now they knew that someone would. They would be ready.